They laughed at the billionaire's blind son, until she guided him through the dance floor. The charity gala. The crystal chandeliers of the Riverside Grand Ballroom cast dancing shadows across the polished marble floor as Seattle's most elite gathered for the annual Children's Foundation Charity Gala. Among the sea of designer gowns and expensive tuxedos, 26-year-old Daniel Ashworth stood quietly beside a marble column, his white cane folded discreetly in his left hand. Despite being the son of tech billionaire Richard Ashworth, Daniel had always felt like an outsider in these glittering social events. Born with a rare genetic condition that had gradually stolen his sight by age 16, he navigated the world through sound, touch, and an acute awareness that many people saw his blindness before they saw him. "Daniel, there you are," came the familiar voice of his father, accompanied by the soft click of expensive leather shoes on marble. Richard Ashworth was a man who commanded attention wherever he went, and tonight was no exception. "The mayor wants to meet you, and there's a photographer from Seattle magazine here." Daniel straightened his shoulders, preparing for another round of uncomfortable introductions, where people spoke too loudly or directed their questions to his father instead of him. "Of course, Dad. Lead the way." As they moved through the crowd, Daniel's heightened senses picked up fragments of conversation. The rustle of silk, the clink of champagne glasses, and underneath it all, the whispered comments that people thought he couldn't hear. Such a shame about Richard's son. Tragic, really. All that money can't fix everything. "I heard he never leaves the house unless he has to." Daniel had learned long ago to let these comments wash over him, but tonight they seemed particularly sharp. Perhaps it was because his father had been pushing him to be more social, to attend more events, to show the family face, as he put it. Across the ballroom, Emma Sullivan adjusted her simple black dress and checked her watch. As a part-time dance instructor working extra jobs to pay rent, she had taken a position with the catering staff for tonight's event. The pay was decent, and she hoped to network with some of the wealthy attendees who might be interested in private dance lessons. Emma had always believed that dance was a universal language, one that could transcend barriers and bring people together. At 24, she had already taught children with various disabilities at the community center, finding joy in helping them express themselves through movement. The evening progressed with the usual charity gala rituals, speeches, silent auctions, and carefully orchestrated mingling. Daniel found himself increasingly isolated as conversations swirled around him without including him. His father, well-meaning but often misguided, had a habit of answering questions directed at Daniel, further reinforcing the invisible barrier between him and others. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "it's time for our traditional charity dance. All proceeds from dance pledges will go directly to supporting music therapy programs for children with disabilities." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. The dance portion of these events was always the worst part for him. While couples glided across the floor in perfect harmony, he remained seated, listening to the music and imagining what it would feel like to move freely without fear of stumbling or appearing awkward. "Come on, Danny," said his cousin Bradley, who had appeared with a group of young socialites. "You should ask someone to dance. I bet plenty of girls here would love to dance with a billionaire's son." The group laughed, but there was a cruel edge to their amusement. Daniel recognized the tone. They were setting him up for humiliation. "I don't think that's necessary," Daniel replied quietly, but Bradley was already signaling to someone across the room. "Victoria Chen, come here. Meet my cousin Daniel." "Daniel, Victoria is a professional ballet dancer." Victoria approached with the confidence of someone used to being admired. She was undeniably beautiful, with perfect posture and an elegant grace that spoke of years of training. "How lovely to meet you," Victoria said, her voice carrying that particular tone people used when they thought they were being charitable. "Bradley mentioned you might like to dance." Daniel felt the setup crystallizing around him, but couldn't see a graceful way out without causing a scene. "I should mention that I'm blind," he said simply. "I don't really dance at formal events." "Oh, nonsense," Bradley interjected loudly, drawing more attention. "It's for charity, Danny. Just follow Victoria's lead. How hard can it be?" The music began. a elegant waltz that filled the ballroom with its sweeping melody. Against his better judgment, Daniel allowed himself to be led onto the dance floor. Victoria took his hands and began to move, but almost immediately the difference in their experience became apparent. Where Victoria expected fluid, practiced movements, Daniel moved hesitantly, relying on his other senses to navigate unfamiliar territory. He tried to follow her lead, but without visual cues, their timing was off. Other couples began to notice, some stopping to watch the spectacle unfold. "Just feel the rhythm," Victoria whispered, but there was impatience creeping into her voice. She began to move more dramatically, perhaps thinking that exaggerated movements would help him follow, but it only made things worse. Daniel's foot caught the hem of her dress, and Victoria stumbled slightly. A murmur went through the watching crowd, and Daniel heard the unmistakable sound of barely suppressed laughter. His face burned with embarrassment as he realized they had become the evening's entertainment. "Maybe we should stop," Daniel said quietly, but Victoria was determined to continue, perhaps not wanting to appear to give up on the charity dance. The song seemed to stretch endlessly as Daniel struggled to maintain his dignity while couples around them began to whisper and point. He could hear his father's voice from somewhere nearby, probably trying to explain the situation to someone, which only made it worse. Just as Daniel was about to excuse himself from the floor, he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder. "Excuse me," came a warm, confident voice he didn't recognize. "May I cut in?" Daniel turned toward the voice, surprised by its calm assurance. Victoria looked annoyed at the interruption. "We're in the middle of a dance," she protested. "I can see that," the voice replied with quiet authority. "But I think Daniel might prefer a different partner." There was something in the woman's tone that brooked no argument. Victoria huffed slightly but stepped back, leaving Daniel standing alone on the dance floor with this mysterious stranger. "I'm Emma," the voice said softly, close enough that only he could hear. "Would you like to continue dancing, or would you prefer to step outside for some air?" The simple question, asked without pity or condescension, nearly overwhelmed Daniel. Here was someone treating him as a person capable of making his own choices. "I'd like to keep dancing," he said, surprising himself with his answer. "But I should warn you, I'm not very good at this." Emma's laugh was like music itself, warm and genuine. "Dancing isn't about being perfect, it's about feeling the music and moving with someone you trust." "Do you trust me?" Daniel hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Emma gently took his hands, and immediately he felt the difference. Where Victoria had tried to force him to follow complex steps, Emma simply swayed with the music, letting him feel her natural rhythm. "Close your eyes," she whispered, then caught herself and laughed softly. "Sorry, force of habit. Just focus on the music and how we're moving together." As they began to dance, Daniel discovered something remarkable. Emma didn't try to lead him through complicated steps or show off her technique. Instead, she adapted to his pace, creating a simple, elegant movement that allowed them both to look graceful. The watching crowd gradually stopped their whispered commentary, drawn into the genuine connection they were witnessing. Here was not a performance or a charity spectacle, but two people sharing a moment of pure communication through movement. "You're a wonderful dancer," Emma said as the music swirled around them. "You just needed the right partner." For the first time in years, Daniel felt truly seen, not as the blind son of a billionaire, not as an object of pity or curiosity, but as himself. As the waltz drew to a close, he realized that this moment had changed something fundamental in him. The applause that followed was different from the polite charity gala clapping they had heard all evening. This was genuine appreciation for something beautiful they had witnessed. As the music ended, Daniel found himself reluctant to let go of Emma's hands. "Thank you," he said simply, but the words carried the weight of years of isolation and embarrassment that had been lifted in a single dance. "Thank you for trusting me," Emma replied. "Would you like to get some fresh air? I know a quiet spot where we can actually hear each other talk." Daniel nodded, and as Emma gently guided him away from the dance floor, he heard something he had never heard before at one of these events: respectful silence instead of pitying whispers. The woman who had appeared from nowhere had not only saved him from humiliation, but had shown him what it felt like to be treated with genuine dignity. As they walked toward the terrace doors, Daniel realized that this mysterious Emma had done something no one else had ever managed. She had made him forget, even for a few minutes, that he was different. Beyond the ballroom, the terrace overlooking Elliott Bay was mercifully quiet compared to the bustling ballroom. Emma guided Daniel to a bench positioned to catch the cool Seattle breeze, the distant sound of water lapping against the marina providing a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "So," Emma said, settling beside him, "that was quite an entrance I made. I hope I didn't embarrass you by cutting in." Daniel turned toward her voice, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Embarrass me? You saved me from what was shaping up to be the most humiliating moment of my life. I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Ashworth." "Emma Sullivan," she replied, and Daniel noted that she didn't react to his last name the way most people did. No sharp intake of breath, no sudden change in tone that indicated she was recalculating his worth based on his family's wealth. "Tell me about yourself, Emma Sullivan," Daniel said. "And please don't start with how sorry you are about my blindness or how brave I am for being here tonight." Emma laughed, a sound that Daniel was quickly becoming addicted to. "Well, that rules out my first 3 conversation starters," she said with mock disappointment. "Let's see, I'm a dance instructor, though tonight I'm working for the catering company. I teach at a community center downtown, mostly kids, some adults who want to learn for weddings or just for fun." "What made you become a dance instructor?" "My grandmother," Emma said without hesitation. "She was a ballroom dance teacher back in the day, had a little studio in her basement. When I was 7, my parents divorced, and I spent a lot of time at her house. She taught me that dance wasn't just about steps and technique, it was about connection, communication, joy. She used to say that everyone can dance, they just need to find their own rhythm." Daniel found himself genuinely interested in her story. "Is that why you intervened tonight? Some kind of professional obligation?" "No," Emma said quietly. "I intervened because I've seen that look before. That moment when someone realizes they're being set up as entertainment for other people's amusement. It happened to one of my students once, a kid with cerebral palsy who wanted to perform in our recital. Some parents thought it would be cute to watch him try. Made me sick." The honesty in her voice surprised Daniel. Most people either avoided talking about disability altogether or spoke about it in overly sweet, inspirational terms. Emma talked about it like it was simply another aspect of human experience. "What happened with your student?" Daniel asked. "I choreographed a piece specifically for him, something that showcased what he could do beautifully rather than highlighting what he couldn't do. By the end of his performance, those same parents who had been expecting cute entertainment were in tears because they had witnessed something genuinely moving. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the party continuing inside. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emma said. "Shoot. How long have you been blind?" Daniel appreciated her directness. "I lost my sight gradually between ages 12 and 16. Genetic condition called Stargardt disease. I could see normally until middle school. Then my central vision started deteriorating." "That must have been incredibly difficult, losing something you had grown up with." "The hardest part wasn't losing my sight," Daniel said, surprising himself with his honesty. "It was losing people's ability to see me as anything other than my blindness. Before, I was just Richard Ashworth's son, which came with its own complications. After, I became the blind son of Richard Ashworth, which was somehow both more and less than what I had been before." Emma was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "Is that why you don't come to these events often? How did you know that?" "Lucky. Guess. You moved through that ballroom like someone who wasn't entirely comfortable with the terrain, but not because of your blindness. More like someone who doesn't spend much time in that particular social ecosystem." Daniel found himself impressed by her perceptiveness. "You're right. I mostly work from home, doing technology consulting for my father's company and a few others. I'm actually pretty good at it. Turns out that learning to navigate the world without sight makes you incredibly good at understanding complex systems and problem solving. But your father wants you to be more social. It wasn't a question, and Daniel realized that Emma was remarkably good at reading social situations. He thinks I'm hiding from the world, Daniel admitted. Maybe he's not entirely wrong. It's easier to stay home than to deal with, well, situations like what was happening on that dance floor. Until tonight. Until tonight. They were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the terrace. Daniel recognized the purposeful stride of his father approaching. "Daniel, there you are," Richard Ashworth said, his voice carrying the subtle tension that meant he was managing a situation he found problematic. "I've been looking for you. Dad, I'd like you to meet Emma Sullivan. Emma, this is my father, Richard." "Mr. Ashworth," Emma said politely, rising to shake his hand. "Your son is a wonderful dancer." Richard's expression shifted slightly as he processed this information. "I see. Are you one of the performers tonight?" Daniel felt a familiar frustration rise in his chest. Even when trying to be polite, his father had a way of making assumptions that revealed his unconscious biases. "Emma is a dance instructor," Daniel said carefully, "and she's the person who prevented me from being humiliated on that dance floor tonight." "I'm sure it wasn't that dramatic," Richard replied, but his tone suggested he was aware that it probably had been exactly that dramatic. "It was," Emma said simply. "Your son was being treated as entertainment by people who should have known better. I've seen it before, and I don't tolerate it." Richard looked taken aback by her directness. Most people in his social circle specialized in polite circumlocution, especially when addressing him. "Well," he said after a moment, "I suppose we should be grateful for your intervention." The slight pause before intervention made it clear that Richard wasn't entirely sure whether Emma's actions had been helpful or problematic. "Dad?" Daniel said, his voice taking on a warning tone. "I should get back to work," Emma said, sensing the family tension. She turned to Daniel. "It was wonderful meeting you, Daniel. I hope you'll continue dancing." "Wait," Daniel said quickly. Would it be possible to see you again? Maybe take a dance lesson?" Emma smiled, though of course Daniel couldn't see it, but he could hear the smile in her voice when she answered. "I'd like that very much. I teach at the Riverside Community Center on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Beginning ballroom class starts at 7. I'll be there," Daniel said with more certainty than he had felt about anything in years. After Emma left, father and son stood in awkward silence on the terrace. "Daniel," Richard began, "I'm not sure that getting involved with the catering staff is—" "Don't," Daniel cut him off. "Just don't. For once in my life, someone saw me as a person first. Don't ruin that by turning it into a class issue." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "I just want what's best for you, son." "I know you do, Dad. But what's best for me isn't hiding from the world or only socializing with people who see me as a charity case or a curiosity. Emma treated me like I was worth knowing, not worth pitying." The following Tuesday evening, Daniel arrived at the Riverside Community Center 45 minutes early, his cane folded and tucked into his jacket pocket, his palms slightly sweaty with nervousness. He had arranged for his usual driver to drop him off, but had requested to be picked up 2 hours later, not wanting to seem presumptuous about Emma's time. When Emma arrived to set up for class, she found Daniel sitting on a bench in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "You're early," she observed with pleasure. "Eager to get started?" "Terrified, actually," Daniel admitted. "I've never taken a dance lesson before. What if I'm terrible at it?" "Then you'll be terrible at it for about 10 minutes, and then you'll start getting better," Emma said practically. "Besides, I've already seen you dance. You're not terrible. You're untrained. There's a big difference." The community center's dance studio was a far cry from the elegant ballroom where they had first met. The floors were scuffed linoleum, the mirrors were slightly warped, and the sound system occasionally crackled. But as Emma led Daniel through basic steps, teaching him to feel the music and trust his partner, none of those imperfections mattered. "Dancing is really just walking with style," Emma explained as she guided his hands to the proper position. "Feel how we're moving together? That's all it is. Structured movement with someone you trust." Over the following weeks, their Tuesday and Thursday lessons became the highlight of Daniel's week. Emma was a patient, intuitive teacher who adapted her instruction style to his needs without making him feel like he required special treatment. More importantly, their conversations during breaks revealed a growing friendship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Emma learned that Daniel had a sharp wit and a deep love of music, that he was involved in developing accessibility software for his father's company, and that he had a quietly rebellious streak when it came to his family's expectations. Daniel discovered that Emma had grown up in a working-class family, that she was putting herself through grad school while teaching dance, and that she had an unshakable belief in the power of art to transform lives. "I have a proposition for you," Emma said one Thursday evening after they had finished working on a particularly complex turn sequence. "There's a dance showcase next month at the university. It's not a competition, just an opportunity for students to perform what they've learned. Would you be interested in performing with me?" Daniel felt his stomach flip. "In front of an audience?" Small one. Maybe 50 people, mostly family members and friends of other dancers. But I think you're ready, and more importantly, I think it would be good for you." "What would we perform?" "I've been working on a choreographed piece to The Way You Look Tonight. It's designed to showcase partnership rather than individual technique. We'd be dancing together, not you following my lead." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with fear and desire in equal measure. "Will you be there with me the whole time?" he asked finally. "Every step of the way," Emma promised. The night of the showcase, Daniel arrived at the university auditorium with his father, who had insisted on attending despite Daniel's protestations. As they waited backstage, Daniel's nerves were frayed to the breaking point. "What if I mess up? What if I trip or miss a cue?" he whispered to Emma as they listened to the previous performers. "Then we'll adapt and keep going," Emma replied calmly. "That's what partners do." When their names were called, Emma took Daniel's hand and led him onto the stage. As the opening notes of "The Way You Look Tonight" began to play, Daniel felt all his anxiety melt away. This was the song they had practiced to dozens of times, the choreography they had refined until it felt like second nature. But more than that, he was dancing with Emma, who had never once made him feel like anything other than her equal partner. The performance was flawless, not because they executed every step perfectly, but because they moved together with genuine connection and joy. When the music ended and applause filled the small auditorium, Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he had experienced in years. Later, as they stood in the lobby accepting congratulations from other performers and audience members, Richard Ashworth approached them both. "That was remarkable," he said to Emma, his voice carrying genuine respect. "Thank you for helping my son find something he's passionate about." "Your son didn't need to find passion," Emma replied. "He needed to find someone who believed in him." Richard looked at Daniel, seeing perhaps for the first time not his disabled son, but a confident young man who had discovered his own strength through the faith someone else had placed in him. "Dad," Daniel said quietly, "I'd like you to really meet Emma, not as my dance instructor or as someone who helped me, but as the woman I'm falling in love with." The words surprised everyone, including Daniel himself. But as soon as he said them, he knew they were absolutely true. Emma squeezed his hand, her smile audible in her voice when she replied, "I love you too, Daniel, not in spite of who you are, but because of exactly who you are." In that moment, standing in a humble university lobby surrounded by the scattered applause of proud families, Daniel realized that he had found something infinitely more valuable than the ability to navigate high society gatherings. He had found someone who saw him completely and loved him unconditionally, and in her eyes, he had learned to see himself the same way. The dance floor had taught them both that the most beautiful partnerships aren't about perfect technique or flawless performance. They're about two people choosing to move through life together, trusting each other enough to be vulnerable, and creating something beautiful from that trust. As they walked out into the Seattle night, Daniel's cane tucked away and Emma's hand warm in his, they both knew that their real dance was just beginning.